Al-Moallem affirms that Syria's commitments to chemical weapons convention should be the first step for clearing the Middle East of weapons of mass destruction, primarily the Israeli weapons of mass destruction. And Syria's permanent representative to the UN says that the resolution adopted by the United Nations Security Council on placing the chemical weapons in Syria under international control covers Syrian government's fears. And Lavrov stresses the importance of resolving contemporary world problems through the United Nations only. Good afternoon, this is News in English from the Syrian Op Division in Damascus. On the sidelines of the 68th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Deputy Prime Minister, Foreign and Expatriates Minister Walid Al-Moallem held a number of bilateral meetings discussing with his counterparts the latest developments in Syria. More about his meetings in the following report.
Deputy Prime Minister, Foreign and Expatriates Minister Walid Al-Moallem met Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on the sideline of the 68th session of the UN General Assembly. Al-Moallem thanked Russia for its support for finding a political solution for the crisis in Syria, reiterating Syrian government's participation in a positive manner in the Geneva conference and upholding its commitments as per the Chemical Weapons Convention, hoping that this effort would be the first step to clearing the Middle East of WMDs, primarily the Israeli WMDs. For his part, Lavrov affirmed Russia's support for a political solution for this crisis in Syria, which preserves the country's unity, sovereignty and territorial integrity, stressing the need to protect the region and the world from terrorism, which is affecting Syria. Al-Moallem held a similar meeting with Algerian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Rastan al-Amamra, discussing with him Arab and regional issues and briefing him on the Syrian government's positions regarding chemical weapons, the Geneva conference, and the need to confront terrorism, which is threatening the entire region. For his part, Al-Amamra affirmed Algeria's commitment to the security and stability of Syria and the safety of its people, reiterating his country's support for a political solution for the crisis in Syria. Minister Al-Moallem also met Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and briefed him on the terrorism targeting the Syrian state and people, and on the support the terrorist groups receive from well-known countries. Al-Moallem expressed the gratitude of the Syrian government and people to China's position in support of Syria in international circles, calling for bolstering relations with the two countries, particularly in light of current events in Syria. In turn, Wang Yi underlined the strong relations between the two countries and their peoples, stressing that China's policy regarding Syria is based on commitment to UN principles and goals and international law, saying that China strongly believes in finding a peaceful solution through the Geneva conference and rejects interference in countries' internal affairs or circumventing the Security Council to take unilateral steps.
The United Nations Security Council unanimously adopted a resolution outlining the details of taking under international control and ultimately destroying Syria's chemical weapons program. United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon noted that the United Nations Security Council resolution includes liquidating the chemical weapons in Syria as soon as possible, adding that the Security Council should work to make both the Syrian authorities and the opposition fulfill their commitments in this context. He added that Geneva II conference would be held next November. The Organization of the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, Executive Council agreed earlier on a resolution regarding a plan for dismantling the Syrian chemical weapons program.
The Council has just adopted the resolution 2118. The Syrian government acknowledges the positive endeavor that led to this consensual language. It is regrettable, however, that some delegations have already started to provide a self-inflicted negative interpretation to the resolution in order to derail it from its lofty purposes. Let me highlight in this regard some points. The resolution reaffirms in its PP2 once again the Security Council commitment to the sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity of the Syrian Arab Republic in accordance with the UN Charter. It also recalls in PP1 and in OP14 Security Council Resolution 1540, which calls in its OP1 on all states to refrain from providing any form of support to non-state actors that attempt to develop, acquire, manufacture, possess, transport, transfer or use of nuclear, chemical or biological weapons and their means of delivery. And it also prohibits in OP2 any non-state actor to manufacture, acquire, possess, develop, transport, transfer or use of nuclear, chemical or biological weapons and their means of delivery, in particular for terrorist purposes. The resolution 2118 welcomes the establishment of the United Nations mission to investigate allegations of the use of chemical weapons in the Syrian Arab Republic. Allegations in plural. This mission was formulated initially upon a request of the Syrian government in order to investigate the use of chemical weapon in Khan al-Assad and to identify the perpetrators of this heinous crime. The resolution underscores in its OP5 that no party in Syria should use, develop, produce, acquire, stockpile, retain or transfer chemical weapons. No party in Syria. It also acknowledges the accession of the Syrian Arab Republic to the Convention on the Prohibition of the Development, Production, Stockpiling and Use of Chemical Weapons and on their destruction. As you are well aware, the Syrian government not only acceded to the convention, but it also decided to apply the convention provisionally, pending its entry into force for the Syrian Arab Republic. This proves undeniably the willingness of the Syrian government to cooperate sincerely with the OPCW in implementing the convention as soon as possible. The resolution 2118 dealt solely with the political option as the only solution to the crisis in Syria. It recalled in PP1 resolutions 2042, 2043, and it stresses in PP12 that, and I quote, the only solution to the current crisis in the Syrian Arab Republic is through an inclusive and Syrian-led political process based on the Geneva Communiqué, and it endorsed in its OP16 the Geneva Communiqué of June 30th, 2012. As you are all aware, the Syrian government has always supported the approach of finding a political solution to what's going on in Syria, and the Syrian government has always supported all the initiatives to this regard, including the Geneva Communiqué itself. The resolution 2118 calls upon all Syrian parties to engage seriously and constructively at the Geneva Conference on Syria. And this is a demand of the Syrian government. Let me remind everyone here that this resolution referred explicitly to Article 25 of the Charter, which reads as follows, and I quote, "The members of the United Nations agree to accept and carry out the decisions of the Security Council in accordance with the present Charter," end quote. This means that all states, I mean all states, have to abide by this resolution. All states, including those neighboring countries of Syria who are providing haven and supporting the terrorists and the armed groups into my country. So the Turkish government, the Saudi government, the Qatari government, the French government, the American government, the British government are all held accountable in accordance with this resolution. And they should all abide by this provision.
Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov affirmed that all incidents related to the use of chemical weapons in Syria, regardless of who used such weapons, must be discussed in a professional and unbiased manner at the Security Council on the basis of facts and data alone, instead of relying on allegations and deductions. In Russia's speech at the 68th session of the UN General Assembly, Lavrov said that the use of chemical weapons is rejected, but that doesn't give anyone the right to accuse and convict without studying available information. He pointed out that the most powerful armed groups in Syria consist of jihadists and extremists who came from all over the world, and that their goals have nothing in common with democracy, because their principles are based on fanaticism and seek to destroy countries' secular qualities. Lavrov affirmed that the crisis in Syria can only be resolved by reviving the political solution and holding the Geneva conference to implement the Geneva Declaration reached in June 2012. In turn, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has stressed China's readiness to make financial contributions to the task of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, in Syria. In his speech at the UN General Assembly, the Chinese Foreign Minister said that China firmly condemns any use of chemical weapons, expressing readiness to make financial contributions to the OPCW task.
Vice Foreign and Expatriate Minister Dr. Al-Moallem said that the Syrian government always asserted that a Syrian-led comprehensive national dialogue without preconditions is the main way to overcome the crisis in the country. In a statement at the ministerial meeting of the non-aligned movement held in New York, Moallem called upon the sides that openly support, fund and arm terrorist groups in Syria, particularly Saudi Arabia and Turkey, to refrain from doing so. He asserted that Syria joined the Chemical Weapons Conventions based on its own national decision, and that it will uphold all the commitments in this action entails. In cooperation with locals in the village of Kafrnan in Rastan countryside, an army unit repelled the terrorist group's attempt to attack the village through bringing an armored vehicle loaded with scores of explosive devices. The driver of the vehicle was killed and the devices were dismantled. In the northern Latakia countryside, an army unit seized a number of explosive devices made by terrorists, communication devices and passports for terrorists belonging to various nationalities. With this, we end our news for today. Thank you for watching. For more details about Syria and the world, and to view this bulletin again, you can always visit our website in English, www.syriaonline.sy. Now to the latest in the world of business and market news with Nariman Qassam, but after a short break.